Deklan J. Lewis is many things and believes fully in living at the intersection of those diverse identities. Deklan is an out proud trans man. He is a father, cat dad, like that. All of it I like, actually. Activist, advocate, artist, musician, writer, seminary student, leader, and friend. If Deklan had to choose one word to describe his life mission, it would be hope. There is always hope. Hope heals, hope saves, hope grows in community. Welcome back.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm nervous. Not that I needed to say that out loud. That's how I try to break up the nervousness, is by getting you all to laugh at the fact that I'm nervous. Bring up my sermon here. So the picture that's up on the screen is this thing that I've been kind of working on and toying with. Is making these silly little cartoon graphics. And the Jesus figure that you see there is actually a figure that lives on the dashboard of my car. He was originally white, and he originally had a white robe with a red sash, and I didn't like it, so I repainted him and made him brown and gay-friendly, because I think Jesus was. So this is kind of, I put that up there to kind of give some context and give a visual for what I'm going to talk about this morning. So I realized as I was putting the finishing touches on this message that it's pretty honest and raw, and I hope that's okay. It occurred to me that this is very much a reflection not only of me but of your pastor. It's because for me, she is one of the safest people on the face of this planet. And so if she was asking me to share, knowing what she does of me in my life, then you must all be safe people too. Hopefully I'm not setting myself up. No, I'm just kidding. Christ collides with our expectations. When I first heard the theme for this Sunday, when Pastor Angie asked me if I'd be willing to share, I thought, that's a loaded phrase. There are so many different directions you could go with a theme like that. I wondered if she had something particular in mind, like the collision between God and my expectations of what God thought about queer people, or my expectations about seminary. But as I read through the resources that you guys provided, the sort of like the sermon outlines and ideas, I was able to narrow my focus just a little bit. Although I also had I realized that this Sunday was Palm Sunday. I've been really bad this year about following the church calendar, and I didn't realize that this was the Sunday she was asking me to preach. But that actually helped me to narrow my focus a little bit, although I have some not so positive feelings about Palm Sunday. Once upon a time, this season in the year of the church was my favorite. It was my father's favorite. I remember him reading this story to me from the Gospels and fighting back the tears as he obviously connected with it on an emotional level. But honestly, my feelings about the Easter story and the theory of atonement and the new covenant and all of that is still under construction, or deconstruction, or reconstruction, or something like that. I think my father must have been someone who was keenly aware of his humanity and his shortcomings. I know that he was someone who struggled to find his voice and who was easily affected and controlled by shame, traits that I would stand to inherit or at least learn. When he died at the age of 35, I was 13. To me, my father was a saint, though I know now that he wasn't. He was imperfect, like all humans. I struggled, like really, really struggled, to understand why God would let him die. Or why, as some people like to say, God would call him home. He was a good man. He loved God. He was so young. Though at 13, 35 seemed pretty old. Now that I am almost 40, it's young. In addition to all those other reasons that I felt God was wrong, the biggest was that I needed him. My father's lost battle with cancer was probably not the first time in my life, nor would it be the last, where my expectations about God and fairness would be shattered. I prayed for him. I begged God not to take him. I tried to be the best kid that I could. The first thing I remember ever asking God for was the ability to be able to go and live with my dad rather than my mom, because they had gotten divorced and my relationship with my mother was not a good one. The second, and maybe if I'm being honest, the last thing I asked God for was for my dad not to die. When my prayers failed, when my good behavior wasn't enough, I decided that God, since God didn't feel that God owed me, or my dad, or probably anyone, anything, then I didn't owe God anything either. In today's scripture reading, there are several different sets of expectations that can be observed. On this subject, I found that your worship leader resource was extremely helpful. I'm going to share some of the things that it outlined. The disciples believed that Jesus was the Messiah, the real king who would put an end to Roman rule and bring freedom to the Jewish people. They thought that Jesus would use military force to conquer the Romans, but his reality differed from their expectations. The Pharisees had their own expectations of Jesus. Many of them saw him as a troublemaker who blasphemed God, falsely claimed to be God, and claimed to have God's authority. They believed they still had control over him and his followers. However, their expectations were also shattered when Christ's reality collided with their expectations. Finally, the people expected everything to continue as usual, without any disruptions. Some hoped that life would remain comfortable for them. Others likely felt hopeless, as if the status quo they were locked in would never change. Expectations were about to be upended by the collision of Christ's reality. Another resource from the resources was the sermon starter, which really got my gears going. Its expectations can be funny. They influence how we see things, people, and even ourselves. Our expectations are shaped by our past experiences, society, internal desires, hopes, and knowledge. However, sometimes our expectations don't match reality, which can be confusing, frustrating, and disappointing. I don't know about anybody else here, but I have a lot of expectations that seem to be under direct and fatal attack these days. It seems that every time I turn around, yet another expectation is smashed, violently, right in front of me. It calls to mind visions of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, a very dark night in the history of our world. Incidentally, the date of Kristallnacht lines up with the date of my father's death, which happened 60 years later. And I, living in what feels like history repeating itself, find myself in a dark place as well. A dark night of the soul, some would call it. For some, the German tanks and soldiers marching onto the streets and occupying towns and cities and countries across Europe would represent Jesus entering Jerusalem, coming to liberate and free the people from their enemies. For others, that moment would be the arrival of the Allied troops, signaling the defeat of the Nazis and end to the death and destruction, Liberation Day. For all, I can imagine that there were disappointed expectations. So it is in our current moment in history. There are those who hail this election of our president as an act of God's will, and they cheer for his enacting of God's will for our country. There's an expectation of the return to greatness. April 2nd was their self-declared Liberation Day. For others, we feel betrayed and lost and helpless and hopeless, much like many of those who lined the streets to welcome Jesus into the city, only to see him crucified days later. We feel silenced and forced back into hiding. Some of us are hunted and detained and deported. Others are sure that we are the next. I don't know about you, but I had expectations. Though they may have been naive and grossly optimistic for the election last fall. I expected that people would do the right thing and vote against the open hatred and tyranny of a particular candidate. I expected that compassion and justice would win. I did not expect what happened instead. After I recovered, somewhat, from the devastation of those dashed expectations, I was promptly all but debilitated by a new set. The expectation the expectation that for perhaps the first time in my life, an elected president would likely deliver on most of his promises, but not the helpful ones, like lowering prices of certain items which I shall not name but rhyme with the word legs. But the worst ones, the most dangerous and damaging ones. Meanwhile, those who voted for him and others did not expect that he would actually, or that he could actually do those things. For once my expectations were met, even exceeded, while others began to wake up to the reality of their own misplaced and misguided ones. I didn't mean to turn this into a talk about politics, but it's kind of hard to not talk about these days. For those of you who didn't know, you all know because it was in my bio, I'm a trans man. I came out only about 2 years ago. I did not expect that this journey would be simple or straightforward, or that anyone or even most people would be supportive. I did know that living as I had been was no longer an option. My reception by the local LGBTQIA+ community was not what I expected. I never expected to feel so much love and support and celebration. The summer when I attended my first Pride festivals, my expectations were again shattered. I had no idea there were so many affirming pastors. Until earlier that year, I had never even met one, let alone the dozens I met standing on the firing line between festival attendees and protesters. I did not expect to end that summer enrolling in seminary and moving on to campus. I did not expect to join forces with so many incredible people to stand up and advocate for not only the LGBT+ community, but other oppressed and marginalized people groups as well. October 2023 through October 2024 was a year of shattered expectations in all of the best ways. And although there is always work to be done, it did feel like we were moving forward. I did not expect all of that to be ripped away so soon. As much as I would like to pretend to be a realist, as tough as I try to make myself seem on the outside, on the inside, I'm really just a big, squishy, perpetually hopeful, all humans start out good, glass half full kind of guy. I freaking knit and crochet, and my cats are named after Harry Potter characters. I genuinely do not understand how people can hate other humans, and to do it in the name of a guy who disrupted the status quo every day, just by existing. Who was homeless, countryless, the result of a questionable pregnancy, whose skin certainly was not white, and who did not speak the language of the empire. A man who was so anti-nationalist as to say that his home was outside the known universe, and encouraged others to do the same, who didn't demand that people espouse a particular theology, vote for a certain candidate, or send him their hard-earned money in exchange for a signed copy of his best-selling book. Jesus didn't judge, condemn, or throw stones. He didn't look down his nose at others. He didn't treat women like objects for his own pleasure, service, and entertainment, or touch children inappropriately when they came to him. He didn't give the best seats to those with the most money, or pander to the whims of the wealthy, or turn a blind eye to injustice and abuse, or to the oppressed and marginalized. I still don't know exactly what I think about what I was taught, the way I was taught to see Jesus, what I was taught to expect in my relationship with and to him. I don't know what I believe about a great deal of things, to be honest, and I don't expect to figure it out anytime soon. But here's what I will say. For a while now, I have felt very uncomfortable with the idea that Jesus was this superhuman, perfect God-man hybrid alien being who was sent by God, Jesus' so-called Father, to fulfill some covenant God had made eons before, as legend had it, with the father of all nations and the father of two very different sons, Abraham. That the whole point of Jesus' existence was to live a perfect life that we are somehow supposed to imitate, and then die at the ripe age of 34, 35, somewhere in that range, and that his death was somehow a payment, a ledger credit, to cancel out the cost of all human sin for all time before and since. I don't have enough time to unpack all of what bothers me about those ideas. It messes with my expectation of what a good God and what a good Father look like. It messes with my understanding of justice. It really messes with how I am supposed to relate to this guy and what the heck any of it is supposed to mean for me right now. The other night I was laying in bed, mulling all of this over. It's been giving me some pretty intense anxiety lately because I'm in seminary and training to be in ministry, and I don't know what I believe about a lot of things. I laid there and I said out loud, I don't think Jesus died for me. The text behind the text was, I don't believe that Jesus died to be salvation for my sins, like the sins that everybody talks about. This was not me walking away from God or even Jesus. It wasn't me saying that who I am is too sinful for Jesus, just that I don't think that any of that was why he died. I think he died because he was a disruptor, because he messed with how things were supposed to be, because he made fools of the wise and he made the strong look weak. I think he died because he was accused of crimes of which he was innocent, but that he gave himself over to the law and order of the time. He didn't call up his big shot lawyer cousin who disappointed his family by not becoming a rabbi, but rather for getting rich off of getting rich people out of trouble. He didn't call in a favor to that guy whose daughter he healed, or the super strong, formerly possessed guy who lived with the pigs, to provide some muscle for hire. I mean, he stopped his own disciples when they attacked the guards. As all of these thoughts were running through my very overactive mind, there was another thought that floated across the screen. It wasn't highlighted in neon lights or blinking to get my attention. It was a small, faint whisper of a suggestion. Maybe Jesus did die for me. Maybe Jesus died for me in the same way that Allied troops on the beaches of Normandy had died for me. Or soldiers in blue on the fields of Gettysburg. Or Anne Frank. Or Emmett Till. Or Marsha P. Johnson. Or Pauli Murray. Or Matthew Shepard. Or Ashton Clatterbuck. Maybe Jesus died to show me that there are things worth dying for. That there are things worth giving it all. Maybe Jesus died to show me that being true to yourself and your values is non-negotiable. Maybe he died to show me that in the face of the greatest injustice, one can still have mercy and compassion and love, and that you can be strong and courageous and also weak and humble and soft. That you can face this world and all that is wrong and not be hardened by it. That you can see that people are flawed, broken, and carry out evil in the name of God and still see something worth saving. I believe that was the Holy Spirit, the Spirit that is in all of us that spoke to me and gently led me to the stream of cool water in that moment. And let me tell you, that was not what I expected. What are your expectations of yourselves, of each other, of humanity, of our government, of this church, of the big church? What are your expectations of God, of Jesus, of the Holy Spirit? Do you need to readjust and reevaluate those expectations? Do you need to let go of certain expectations? Have you been hurt by shattered expectations? Have you failed to live up to some kind of expectation? Do you struggle to allow yourself to even have expectations anymore? Have you lost hope or faith? Do you lack courage? Are you tired? Do you have places in your life where you feel like you put all of your hope into a king on a donkey, only to watch helplessly while the rest of the crowd shouted, "Crucify him"? What would it feel like to sit with those things? To hold them in your hands and look at them and say to them, "I believed in you, and you let me down. I trusted you, and you broke that trust. I prayed, and you didn't answer." Can you let the doubts have their voice without putting your hand over their mouth? Can you let the disappointment roll down your cheeks without rushing to wipe it away? Can you let the anger sit on your chest without trying to shrug it off or push it down? And can you still be open just enough to hear a gentle whisper? Maybe Jesus did die for you. Maybe Jesus did conquer death and the grave and sin and darkness in me and in you. Are you willing to set aside your expectations of Jesus, or better yet, will you step aside as he sets his collision course with them? Palm Sunday is a weird thing for me, kind of like Advent and Christmas. We celebrate the anticipated arrival of someone who we expect to make it all right. There's a line in one of my favorite stories. Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, Sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter meets its death, and when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again. If you know the story, it's not quite as simple as that rhyme that had been passed down through generations meant to keep hope alive. Aslan comes, but there's still work to be done. So we celebrate the coming, the arrival, the hope. Just like I celebrated this past year at every milestone of becoming more myself. But I knew there was more work to be done. Jesus received a hero's welcome from many, but when it was all said and done, it seemed like things were worse than before he came. His was not the last death of those who dared to stand boldly in the minority. Despite the catastrophic collision he had with their expectations, many still followed after the way he laid out for them. Even in the darkest times to come, there were always a few. In another book from that same series, later on in the story in which Narnia existed, things have changed so much that there is a minuscule number of people who remember that Narnia or Aslan even existed at all. In fact, there were those actively working to erase any trace of it from the history books. One character in that book, possibly my favorite in the entire series, with the exception of Aslan, is Pigrim, a marshmallow. If there was ever a name for a character that was like the perfect name for a character, that's the one. C.S. Lewis hit it on the head. In a moment of incredible bravery, Pigrim declares, "I am on Aslan's side. Even if there isn't any Aslan to lead it. I'm going to live like a Narnian, even if there isn't a Narnia." It feels a little like we are living in those times. Our expectations are in ruins. Our hopes feel dashed. They're erasing history and people, and it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. But, as for me, I'm on Jesus' side, even if there is no Jesus to lead. I'm going to live like Jesus, even if nobody else will. For Aslan and Narnia, for Jesus and empathy and love and mercy and redemption and hope. Who else will join me?
Amen.
Love you too. I'm going to share a song real quick. It's not the one with the slides, so you're good. I don't have slides for this one. It's a song by an artist that I grew up listening to. He was my dad's favorite artist, and if I had to guess, I would say that there are at least a few people here who will recognize it. So, hopefully I can get through this without crying.
God in the form of this angry young man.
carpenter's son, for a madman that died for a dream. You'll have the faith his first father